there, this is Sergio Sais with the Real Estate Hedgehog podcast, January 2024. I was going to say 1994. That's
Yeah.
crazy. But 2024, and it's our first podcast of the year. And we're doing a podcast. This is part three of a three-part podcast that we started late last year. Part one had to do with asset quality, and Sam and I talked about cash on cash, return on equity. And then we went to part two, which dealt with the total return on investment. So today we're going to be talking about part three, which is like the overall quality of an asset. What makes it really worthy of investment? But before we go into that, I just want to introduce again my partner, Sam. Sam, how have things been going for you recently, buddy?
This is a new year. It's going good, but like anything else, as I grow, I get a little hiccups along the way. So we had talked about a while back. We had lunch about a week ago. New Year's Day, some neighbor shot some fireworks, landed on the roof of my apartment, burned all the garages down, all kinds of nonsense. But hey, it's just part of part of ownership.
Right. And in fact, even before we came on, we were just catching up on with each other. And Sam was saying how he's got like 5 or 6 vacancies, which might sound like a lot to somebody, but really, I mean, this is just, that's less than 10% of what you got, right? Going.
Correct. So I mean,
So,
here I've got 7 non-paying tenants the last couple of months. Of them, there's about 5 vacancies. The rest are just non-paying, getting evicted.
right.
But overall, when you slice it up and you calculate it for the year, it's probably about 3% at best, because you got to remember these are just 1 or 2 months out of the year.
Myself, I'm going through, I was telling Sam that one of my properties in Missouri, one tenant isn't paying and is being evicted, and then the other one is going through a hardship sort of situation. So I'm talking with the property manager about what are the legal responsibilities that we have and what are the legal, what's the word I'm looking for? Not responsibilities, but anyways, what sort of benefits does the tenant have being a tenant there? This is in Missouri. So the property manager's checking into that. So yeah, this is just part of the cycle of being a property manager. It's not a bad thing.
Yeah.
Which, you get new tenants. Usually that means you can sometimes raise the rent. So there's always something good. But let's get started on this. So, like I said, part three of 3 parts. And today we're going to be talking about the overall quality of an asset, what actually makes it worthy of an investment. So, Sam, when you go look at a property, and what is one of the first things that you're going to think about once we've gone through part one and part two type stuff?
So when I look at a property, if it already checks off all the number boxes and calculation boxes, I take a step back, I kind of close my eyes, and I kind of envision owning this thing, for several months, several years. And I think to myself, looking at everything I see before me, how much work is this going to require of me? Meaning,
Okay.
how active does my management have to be for this specific asset? That's kind of almost the final determining factor of if this is a quality asset where I want to pick up.
So question there, then, if obviously depends on the type of property. If it's an A property, probably not so much work, right? If
Correct.
it's a B property, maybe a little bit more, and then of course a C property even more. But that doesn't mean you steer away from C properties though, right?
That is correct. So it's a balance, right? So
Okay.
with an A property where it requires very little management, I would expect some solid tenancy, good returns, a good location. If
Right.
it's a C property that might need a little more intensive management, obviously I would think that the price is a little lower per door. I'm getting more units, or there is a value add component in there somewhere where I know that when I need to exit this property, there's profit or profitability is going to be pretty much assured.
Excellent. So you mentioned something very interesting right there, the exit. So obviously, the first thing you're looking is when you're going to go in, how much more work is going to be required personally of you, other than just the normal, acquisition type of work that you do when you get the property. But then you said right now, but then you're also thinking about the exit already.
Correct. So
How are
now
you?
that has to do with strategy, right? So my strategy, I'm not the type to buy and hold forever. And I know
Okay,
some people do, which is perfectly fine. So for me, the exit is always on my mind. And my exit strategies that I look at for all properties I try to, or I'm thinking about acquiring, is the around the 24-month mark, the 5-year mark, and at the most the 10-year mark. So those are what I look at as exit opportunities. Now, here's the reason why. If it's a major value add and I know that I got this for a big discount, then there's a good likelihood that I'm going to go ahead and exit in a year or two because I've added the value and the opportunities there to make more money in order to transition into a higher quality asset or a larger asset.
okay,
If I'm going to be holding 5 to 10 years, those are for other reasons. Generally, when I talk about 5 years, that has to do more internally regarding the loan, because most loans for whatever reason, when you're looking into the commercial space, it starts to mature around that 5, 7, or 10 years. So you got to think about how are you going to exit? Are you going to refinance, keep it, sell it? So that's where I think about, will I have an opportunity then based on this specific quality? Finally, my 10-year, if I were to hold anything that long, the reason why I chose 10 years is because 10 years is the general real estate cycle, meaning if for whatever reason I bought at the wrong time that I could not see because hindsight's, always 2020, then likely I will have to hold it for 10
yeah,
years before it gets to a point where I can actually exit profitably. In almost all real estate, time will erase all mistakes. So the longer you hold, the more things you can overcome. And so if you bought during a bad point of the cycle, 10 years is probably when you're going to be able to trade it. And that's kind of why I brought those numbers up.
of course, there are different types of strategies. Of course, if you're a home flipper or a property flipper, that's another type of strategy that could be used. But where does, and answer this for me, please, where does location come into the equation when you're making these decisions based, strategic type decisions?
Oh, yeah. So location is always in the equation. It's actually number one in the equation because in any exit strategy, desirability of the location is the number one reason of how quick that property can be sold, right? If it's not
Okay,
in a good location, you're gonna have a hard time trying to exit this property because you're gonna have to find that desperate investor or that investor that just likes this area. But if it's a really desirable area, then you're gonna have people clamoring for your property. Sometimes people are knocking on your doors all the time trying to take it off your hands almost immediately. And I've had that happen to me many times. So location is always number one. And it's not just a cliche, when they say location, 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 when it comes to real estate, time and location are basically the foundation of long-term wealth.
excellent. So here's probably my last question on this. I know that you've made an investment on a wide variety of types of properties, single family homes, small multifamilies, and then larger multifamilies. So does the unit mix come into play again when you're trying to figure out your exit strategy?
Yes, so I'm glad you brought that up. So that is another side of exit strategy. So just below location is your unit mix or the desirability of the specific property. Meaning, for those of you who don't know what unit mix means, it's basically how are the units designed? Are they 1 bedrooms, 2 bedrooms, 2 bathrooms, a 2 bedroom and a garage, 3 bedroom, 2 bath? These are the things that people are looking for. So for example, if you have an apartment or rental units that are predominantly or primarily studios and 1 bedrooms, they may be good money makers because you get a lot of the single and maybe young couple workforce that comes through, but there's a lot of turnover. And because there's a lot of turnover, when it's time to exit that strategy, a lot of investors kind of shy away from it, those that don't want to deal with a lot of work. When
Right.
you have 2 bedrooms or 3 bedrooms, you get a lot more families, young couples with young children. Oftentimes they're stable because they're set in their place. They're going to a certain school area. They don't want to pull their kids out of school. So oftentimes they're more tolerant and they stay longer. Thus, it makes that unit makes more desirable because you can always rent a 2 bedroom or a 3 bedroom to a single person, but you can't always rent a 1 bedroom to a family of 4 or 5. It doesn't make sense. So as you can see, that's what makes the unit mix so important.
Excellent. So I do actually have one more quick question for you because again, I know from your experience, does it matter so much if it's when you're trying to sell, when you're trying to exit, if it's a single family home or if it's multi-units? Have you found any difference there? Or is it just based, like what you said, based on location and unit mix, stuff like that?
Oh, it does matter. It matters a whole lot. So now we go back into personal strategies and tolerances, right? I will say that from my experience, it's a lot easier to sell and transact single family homes. The reason is because the pool of buyers is a lot greater. We're talking about a difference of maybe 100 folds. When you're
Mhm.
talking about multifamily, even with 2, 3, 4, and as the numbers go up, it gets more difficult because now you're speaking about investors.
Yeah.
So that's the difference. An investor will buy a multi-unit, 2 or more, because they feel that that's how they generate their profits. They're not going to live in it. And if they do, they're going to have to rent out the other one anyway. So it's an investment property no matter how you slice it for the most part. A single family home, you can have investors buy it, but you have the regular person who just wants to own a home want it as well. So now you have a lot more demand, and that's what it's about, right? Supply and demand. When you have more demand, you get better pricing and it transfers faster. The other side of it also is when you're looking at multi-units, it also costs more, and not everybody can afford it. And then when you're talking about apartments, you can look at one of our older videos. That's a whole other gamut of qualifications and financing and net
Right.
worthiness and stuff like that. So not everybody can buy it. So these are things you got to think about. And also trading back and forth, it happens more with investment property. So in a regular property, people are buying out of emotions. An
Mhm.
investment property is just that. People are buying based on what they see on paper. So if the numbers don't jive, they're going to trade back and forth. When I say trade, that means negotiate. They're going to want this discount. They're going to want that to be put in place. So all these things occur that just lengthens the transaction time, or it can cancel a transaction halfway through.
Excellent. So again, to me, what that tells me is that your exit strategy really starts at the entry point.
Yeah.
You know, you have to, if again, if you're an investor, it's different than just buying being a homeowner or buying a home for your own personal use. But as an investor, whether it's a single family, small multi-families, or larger, again, the exit strategy starts at the entrance because you have to understand
Yep.
these types of variables that come into play. So,
Yeah, so I
absolutely.
can give you an example for those who want hard numbers.
Okay.
So I purchased a 10 unit, for example, back at the end of 2021. I had an exit strategy in mind. It was 10 units. The mix was 4 of them were 2 bedroom, 2 bath, and 6 of them were 1 bedroom, 1 bath. I purchased it at that time, was very deferred, so I got it at quite a discount.
Okay.
But because it's so deferred, meaning it looked like it probably needed a new roof or could use a new roof, it needs some rehab inside most of the units, if not all the units. So therefore, I knew that when I closed my eyes and took a look back, this is going to need a lot of work for me. And it did. It needed a lot of hands-on management. But there was value to it because the area was selling for about 150 to $160,000 per unit, and I bought this building at about $95, 95,000 a unit. But
That's
because
great.
of that deferred maintenance and the low rent, so I'm going in knowing that I'm not going to make that much money,
Mhm.
as in cash flow. So the return on the cash on cash return on equity is going to be very low, but the return on investment as a whole, at including that exit strategy, would have been very high or predictably very high. So purchasing it, buying it, raising rents, evicting a few people out, rehabbing it, making it more desirable, making it look cleaner. 4, 5, 6 months later, sold it, meaning exited from that property at roughly a $400,000 profit from the purchase price, right?
Nice.
So as you can see, that's the whole picture of it.
Yeah.
Is it something that I think is achievable by everybody? I think so. When you just take a moment and break it down to step by step on how you look at a property, I think that regardless if it's a 1 unit or a 10 unit or a 20 unit, it's exactly the same thing. Does it check off your cash on cash that you want or you don't want? Does it check off your return on investment that you're looking for? Is there a return on equity formula that you're looking for in your mind when to exit? And do you think it's easily exitable when time comes? In this particular scenario I talked about, it's in a very populated city. I knew that it was a desirable place. There's one thing that we didn't talk about was the velocity
Okay.
of trade. So when you're looking at any community you're about to invest in, and we're talking about location, right? And we're talking about from an investor's perspective, you want to find a community where people are trading properties frequently, because that tells you that it's a desirable place. People are always buying, they're always looking to come into this place. So you'll see transactions occurring all the time. There are some communities that people buy and hold and never sell.
Mhm.
So those types of places, there's a lot of pros and cons to it too. Preferably for me, for those who want to grow, you want to find a place that trades frequently, because you can jump into that trading game at any given time and not worry about, oh, people aren't really looking here because nobody trades here and you're going to be the only guy, but people never really want to look at that area because they don't assume that people are going to trade here.
Right, right, right.
Yeah.
Okay, excellent. So you know what? That was actually a great summary along with the velocity of trade, which I know could be in and of itself a podcast that we could dedicate to it. And maybe we'll do that just to get into more of the nitty gritty. But as Sam said, if you want to go back and look at our part one and part two, part one was on the asset quality, the cash on cash, the return on equity. Part two again had to do with the return on the investment. And then, of course, now we're talking about the exit strategy, which is part three. So I hope that folks, if you want to get that other information, go look at those other videos, kind of couple it, put it together with this one. And it does give you a real nice picture of what to do and what to look for when you're looking to invest in real estate. Any final word of encouragement for our folks here, Sam?
No, that's it. I think 2024 is here. Don't let it go
Yes.
by. Keep moving,
Right.
and I don't just say these things. I've got 3 or 4 of my buildings right now on the market, and I'm doing that just to
Nice.
test the desirability of the market at the moment with the current rates. But if the
Okay.
numbers are right, I'll pull the trigger on selling them too. So you got to keep it moving. It's velocity in the market.